Good morning, listener. Oh, listeners. Good morning, viewers. What can I say? It's almost New Year's. And then when we go to Pat McGart, you'll see him smiling from ear to ear at the thought of another year coming up. Yahoo!
Yahoo! Yeah, yeah. I'm doing me normal look out the window weather forecast, and
Uh,
this morning it's uh what is the dark days of December? I can't remember who said that, but there's definitely true, Jude.
yeah.
Jesus, every day is dark now.
Oh, yes. It
Um,
hardly gets a chance to stand up before it has to sit down again. You know,
yeah.
you hardly get
Uh,
brightness before it's darkness again.
but
But anyway,
anyway,
it's
the
the
days are
inner
getting
man that
longer.
counts, not the stuff outside. It's not
Yeah.
what happens to you, Pat. It's how you react to it.
So they say. What was it? Billy Connolly says there's no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing.
I know that's a good point. Good point. Okay, this is a sad time of the year because inevitably we look back at it and we talk about people who have left us. Um,
Mm.
is anybody spring to your mind in terms of There's a number of people I've listed here, but anybody in particular spring to your mind that?
I will do the one that comes to mind right away is the one that died yesterday, Jimmy Carter. Like
100 years
Jimmy
old.
Carter, Jude, he was 100 years old, born in 1924, and he survived. But Jude, no, and the thing about Jimmy Carter, he stood for something that's almost sneered at now. He stood for human rights and principles and values. But there was two things. He didn't quite fit in with the establishment, and the establishment media derided him right, left, and centre. And then, of course, remember the famous one about Napoleon? Don't bring me great generals, bring me lucky generals. He was unlucky a couple of things. He hit the remember the oil crisis and so on, and then the during the Islamic Revolution in Iran and the what was the 157 50 something Americans who happened to be in Tehran were held hostage for more than a year.
Hmm.
And when President sent a sort of Marine Corps to sort of rescue them, and eight of it was a total fiasco. 7 or 8 of the Marines died
And there was
in
a
the
helicopter
attempting
crash, wasn't there?
a
There.
helicopter crash. Remember Obama at the time and Osama bin Laden. That boosted Obama big time. Well, the exact opposite happened. Jimmy Carter, when
Yeah.
that raid failed, he sort of said, this guy's a loser and all the rest of it. But
Mhm.
what I'm getting at, Jude, is compared to the likes of Trump, Jimmy Carter,
You'll have to raise the
was
bar a bit higher than that. You have to.
yeah, but no, the antithesis.
Yeah.
Everything that Trump is, Jimmy Carter wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Carter was honest, decent, stood for human rights. Uh, by the way, was not in the least bit scared to say Israel it was an apartheid state. He stood, on. I think history will say that he was one of the great human beings. Dude, even in his 90s, he was working for, I think it was called Habitat for Humanity. He was
Yeah.
out working, building houses for the poor.
Hmm.
He didn't sit and in his back room, all the rest. His life was done, lived, doing good things.
Hmm.
And and know that what we said, we've all got credits and debits in our lives.
Hmm.
I would say the credits in his and that and his life far, far, far outweigh the debits or any of
Well,
the wrongs that he done.
I would agree with you completely, Pat, that he was a very good man, and you could see it in his face and the way he talked. Although he can't have been that big a slouch now, because he got the nomination for the Democratic Party, and I think a few of the Kennedys were angling for that. Teddy Kennedy, I
Yeah,
think, would have been angling for it, and he managed to take it. I think his wife was a great influence on him. They called her was it Iron Lotus or Iron Orchid or something like that. But she
yeah,
was a pretty tough cookie, I think. Whereas he looked a
yeah.
very soft, sort of gentleman. But he was, as you say, unlucky with that Middle East crisis and Iran and the hostages
Mm.
taken from the American embassy. He was also unlucky in terms of, because most presidents run for 2 terms if they can, and he went to run for the second time, and he came up against Ronnie Reagan. And Ronnie
Mm.
Reagan wiped the floor with him in his bit by repeating, "There you go again."
Aye,
I,
yeah.
I, I've always thought that was a stupid, stupid thing. Or maybe, I said it wasn't a rational thing. Oh, this guy's not fit to be president. Why? Because he's made a laughing stock of by people like Ronnie Reagan saying, "There you go again." Um, I thought Jimmy maybe wasn't the most skillful of politicians, but he was a good man, as you say. But unfortunately, if you're going to be president of the United States, it's not just your goodness or even your goodness
No.
that matters
Just
most.
one night I heard him on, and being interviewed by somebody whose name totally escapes me now. And there was an intellectual depth to him that didn't become apparent in certain other aspects. And I was wondering, why didn't he show that during in certain debates? He was actually very, very good. Like this a guy, Jude. Go back to what you said yourself. He was a peanut farmer from Georgia who
Yeah.
ended up president of America. He
Mm.
was a naval officer who apparently served with distinction in the Second World War. So this is a guy who there was depths to him. But I
Ah,
remember the he was being interviewed by like Hard Talk or something like that, one of those programs, and Jude, he came across far more intelligent than he ever did when he was president of America. So I don't know, maybe they're dumbing down in American politics. I don't know.
yeah, a lot was made of that fact that he was a peanut farmer, and I must say, when you hear that, I tend to think of him with a few fields that he sort of
Yeah.
tilled and grew peanuts on. I strongly suspect, however, that it was a very big sort of business that he had
It made
going.
him a multi-millionaire.
Ah,
So
well, it can't
it
have been
was,
just a
yeah,
few
yeah,
fields then. Um, but yes, he was a good man, and I liked the fact that, as you say, he was doing clearly good things after he left office. Whereas
yeah.
a lot of other presidents and a lot of other prime ministers and a lot of other Taoiseach, you can see them getting their finger into the
They get
cookie
on the
jar.
gravy train, and do not. It's all a self-enrichment scheme after
Aye,
the,
they're all
yeah,
the CEOs of this, that, or the other, the
yeah. And
director, put their name in the
they
head.
get these sinecure directorships
Yeah,
where they're paid
yeah,
30,000 for this one and 30,000 for that one and 30, about 4 or 5 directorships, and they're sitting
yeah.
on about 200 a year for showing up twice a year or something.
Well, maybe that's not that. I mean, it's like the market, you know. If the market's going to offer people that, they'd be fools not to take it. But as you
Yeah.
say, Carter stands out. He wasn't a very big man, but he does stand out in that respect. He was always involved in something very religious,
Another way,
man, too. Don't forget, very religious.
is he was. But here's the thing, dude. If tomorrow morning you knew you were going to war, would you want a sort of card like Donald Trump beside you, or would you want somebody a little solid like Jimmy Carter? Like I'd take Carter every time because you know
Oh, jeez.
he wouldn't
Well,
run over you.
Pat,
Yeah.
that's an
Well,
unfair comparison. I would nearly take a well-trained monkey rather than Trump.
yeah.
Anyway,
Right.
let's talk about a few other people who have died. It sounds morbid, but I mean it's good to remember their lives
Yeah.
and
The
what they
passing of
did.
the year. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's an article today about the papers have been released in Dublin, and apparently the young John F. Kennedy in 1945 belittled the idea of Irish unification. There was this guy who was, I think, the Irish ambassador to the US called Robert Brennan, and he
Hmm.
sought out Kennedy in 1945 after he came back from the war and, sort of a war hero, and asked him about the United States backing. Would they be backing in a uh, degree for Irish unity? And he found out that the article says he went on to tell a startled Brennan. I don't know, I'd be startled if he was an ambassador. Startled Brennan that the United States would not act out of quotation marks altruistic motives in calling for an end to partition. He was non-committal, and essentially what he was saying is that every country is going to look after themselves, and he didn't have any feelings whatsoever for any romantic notion of Irish unity. Uh, that rings a bell for me because I remember the time Kennedy was here, 63, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he addressed the two houses of the Oireachtas, and it was on TV live. I remember watching it and impressed by the way he talked and all. And the one thing I noticed was he never mentioned the North or partition at all.
No.
But the troubles had yet to begin. But I remember feeling a little pang of disappointment and wishing that could have been part of his perfection. So he was a down to earth guy, I would say, when it came to Irishness. He used his Irishness to the hilt when he thought it would help him, and boy, did he use it that time he visited. But other than that, I don't know why the Irish ambassador to the US would be startled to find out that Kennedy was non-committal and not too interested in
But
Irish unity.
I suppose if you put it in context, this was after shortly after the Second World War. Ireland
Mm,
had stayed neutral. He
yeah.
had been involved in the war. Britain and US were big allies.
Mm,
The Brits, the Americans had all come over and had bases all across the UK and so on. And
yeah.
so they fought the Germans together. And I know a lot of Americans had an issue. Even Irish American had issues with Ireland staying neutral and the fight against evil and all that sort of crap. But anyway, uh, apparently, Jude, I'm open to correction this again as usual. But apparently, his Irishness was awakened. He came over about 1950 something, and went down and visited the relatives down in Wexford, and apparently surprised everybody by being very much at home, and
hmm
sat in with some old aunt or something or
hmm
great
hmm
aunt and had coffee or tea or whatever it was at the time. And somebody said that it was a sort of a strange awakening that had stirred something in him, that it wasn't fake. And apparently, then when he came back in '63 as president. Sure, did you know when the funeral? Apparently he was so enthralled by was the Irish Army band that he must have loved them that much that even Jackie Kennedy asked them that they play at his funeral. So like he must have been talking about Ireland, and I remember he said apparently it was the best couple of days of his life, and he was going to come back.
Pat, I think you're romantic, Pat. I think you're romantic.
No,
I think he came
no,
here both
no,
times.
no. But I remember at the time reading that he had said to someone, "Now, whether that's fake or bollocks, who knows?"
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that there must have been something there.
Well, it could have been the fact that he was Irish, an Irish background,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he could have realized that. I would imagine that his grandfather, who became mayor of Boston,
yeah.
he wouldn't have exactly hid his Irishness. I'd say he would have flaunted it. I guess if you went back and checked the records, you'd find he was very much an Irish mayor running for, or an Irish candidate running for the mayoralty of
Yeah.
Boston. And the same thing applies. I honestly, I don't think that any politician does anything without one eye on how that's going to go down. Now, I would say
Absolutely, Jude.
Kennedy went to
Of
Ireland in
course
the
it is.
50s. Hold on, maybe,
Yeah,
let me finish. I'd
yeah,
say Kennedy went to Ireland in the 50s to sort of
yeah.
prepare the ground should he come back at some future date.
That's very cynical,
I
but
know, yeah, that's right.
probably agree with you. Yeah, yeah. But, Jude, you're 100% right. Most politicians. I remember there was a great story I read some years back. Obama. This is how far ahead. Obama came over to England and about 15, 20 years ago, before even he was a well-known name. And it was for somebody's and there was a guy's night out, and they had a stripper at this sort of. He left. He was thinking ahead. Imagine 10 years later, Obama at some nightclub where there's a stripper. He was thinking ahead. I am not going to be photographed here. In other words, he was thinking down the road when he ran for Senate or presidency. John
Mhm.
F. Kennedy, and back in the '60s, having an Irish base running for presidency was a massive help.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Of course, I have to say now, it might have been Obama didn't like strippers. Maybe he just
No,
it
I
wasn't
got the
his
impression it
thing.
was much more. He was much more aware of the public image and the damage
Well,
photographs.
yeah. I suppose you always have to be on your guard, both in terms of what you say and the things that you do, or where you're caught doing things, because one image or one sentence can destroy you, as we've seen with others. Um, One of the other people who died, Pat, was OJ Simpson. Do you remember him?
Absolutely. Oh,
Orange
geez, yeah,
juice, he used to call him.
yeah.
Orange juice.
Uh, yeah.
Uh,
There was a man. What was he's his ex-wife and her
Love him.
boyfriend
Lover.
her huh?
Her lover.
Lover were found dead.
Yeah.
OJ, remember the famous? He goes and a white and the police car following behind him, and he's doing 30 miles an hour, and everything stopped. Now, Jude, how how he was found not guilty after that is beyond me, because those were the actions, as far as I was concerned, of a totally guilty man. Was getting away from the scene. The cops are following. He didn't stop. He didn't get out. He drove the car for a couple of hours on a highway on his own. Like, Jude, if he wasn't guilty, why'd he do that?
Yeah, maybe he wanted to go to a shop to buy some milk or something, you know.
Some milk and orange juice. Yeah.
But he was, he
By
was,
the way,
it was got later, Pat. He was
yeah,
nailed,
but he was not later for a civil case. Dude, he
yeah.
was, yeah,
And it cost him over $33 million
yeah.
and 9 years in jail. You know,
No, I didn't get nine. No, I didn't. No, I didn't get 9 years in jail for that. He got 9 years in jail for. Remember, he went into some guy and took someone by force.
that's right. It was memorabilia, stuff that belonged
A
to him. He said,
memorabilia, and he's claimed they were his, and he
yeah.
took him by force. He went in.
Uh,
He and this other guy went in, and basically, it was sluggery.
Yeah, that's sort of sad. I don't know. I have a soft spot for these guys because when they're at their prime, they're wonderful. It's like Paul Gascoigne. You know, Paul Gascoigne as
Yeah,
a footballer was a thing of joy and beauty. You know, he
absolutely.
was a
Yeah,
superb player. And, you know, for the last, what, 20, 30 years, he's sort of been a figure of fun and he's obviously had mental
yeah.
health issues. And, it's just so sad to see that. A man, however, that died during the year and that didn't sort of decline or muddy the image he had was Sven-Göran Eriksson. Remember, the fuss there was when he tried when he was appointed as manager of England. The English were
Yeah.
very annoyed because they thought it was saying there was nobody in England who was fit to be manager
Yeah.
for their team.
Yeah, he was the first foreign manager that the English had appointed.
That's right.
And by the way, back in the day, he was on 4 million a year. Dude, that wasn't that
Oh my,
unbelievable money back
that's not
then?
bad. That's
Yeah,
not bad. Yeah.
yeah, and so by the way, I remember Sven-Göran Eriksson at the Brandywell. He was manager of Benfica, and they go over
Really?
to play Derry City.
Yeah.
And apparently, was a genuinely nice man, very sort of
Mm,
humble and
mm,
easy to get along with. I remember at the time some of our guys had gone over to interview him and take photographs and all the rest, and said he was an absolute gentleman and so on. No,
mm.
so on. But anyway, the bottom line of what's him is he seems to have got on very well, and he was. Now, Jude, I saw the England's performance in he lost his job shortly afterwards. I remember he brought Peter Crouch, and I can't remember the young fella from Arsenal, Walcott, Theo Walcott.
Mhm.
And it was like little and large. In the sense, Peter Crouch was about 6'8", and
Yeah.
Theo Walcott was about 17, and really shouldn't have been there. And then he couldn't play him. So the last couple of games were a disaster, and
Mhm.
you could see that England had nobody up front at all. So
Mhm.
he was derided as being sort of tactically, whatever word you want to use.
But he
So
did,
anyway, he
you
lost
know.
his job.
He got them to
Say again.
he got them to the what they call the finals, to the
Yeah.
World Cup
Oh,
or European
remember,
Cup.
remember, Jude, the 5-1 it was against Germany. He started off with a bang.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I suspect he was a pretty good manager, but not a great one, as they say.
But,
But he's
hold on, Jude, before you go off. Remember what the real controversy was his love life.
exactly what
What
I
do
was
you call
going to
them?
say.
Uh, sorry, you got carry on with
No,
that
you
now.
want
Then.
to? Okay, I'll tell you. He had an affair with his fellow Swede, as the report says, his fellow Swede and television presenter Ulrika Johnson. And I mean,
Yeah,
she was a star, big star at the time in her own right, not just
yeah,
because Sven-Göran Eriksson. And then
yeah.
What wasn't there? What was his wife's name? She was.
She was called. She wasn't his wife. She was his partner,
Oh,
Nancy something or other.
Nancy.
Nancy.
That's right, Nancy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And she was an Italian lawyer, and she was very glamorous as well.
Uh, uh, my daughter was telling me in England she was in a restaurant and Nancy appeared and the buzz around the restaurant was something fantastic.
Yeah,
And there was all sorts of claims about her. But anyway, I leave that. I thought, the thing that impressed me most about Sven was that he got a terminal diagnosis, right? About
yeah.
what, 6 months, 9 months ago? And
yeah,
he went then, he was shown going places, in particular to Liverpool, I think, where
yeah,
he
Liverpool, yeah.
spent a day and they showed him around. And he said he was so grateful and smiling and so on. I think he must have had marvelous strength of mind. I mean, if I
Yeah.
was given a terminal diagnosis, I'd be lying in a corner whimpering. But
Oh.
Sven was out there and he was talking and saying, "This is just wonderful, and thank you," and so on. Uh,
Yeah, apparently his father had been a Liverpool supporter, and he
oh,
always wanted. By the way, to digress, last night, did I watched an absolutely lovely program on RT. There's a young fella called what Dara did next, Dare. A young fella from I think it must be Monaghan. He's born without arms or legs,
oh
and
God.
anyway, he went and it was a totally uplifting program. And he fella, he went over to Liverpool and met Jurgen Klopp. And what Klopp did for him, he said himself, and he's only about 13, changed his life. He said when he went out, people, he always felt people were staring at him and laughing at him and all the rest. Klopp basically said to him, "Hey, get on with your life. Stop worrying about what other people, and he is highly intelligent and he's a great young fella, by the way, and all the rest. But what Klopp done for him, another person can make a big difference to somebody's life. The wee fella said his whole attitude to life has changed after meeting Klopp, because Klopp had sort of told him, "No, don't live like this. Get out there." And
Hmm.
Klopp was spent apparently 2 hours chatting to him.
Well,
So people
that's
can make
kind
a
of
difference.
wonderful. All right, I
Yeah,
have a notion. I read that Klopp was very big into the whole team, the Liverpool team, making itself available to people, and associating itself with charities and visiting places,
that
and
it was
very much a
socialism.
part of the community. Um,
Yeah,
which I thought was kind of marvelous. And, that's what's lacking to a great extent, I think, in many of the big clubs is that they're so powerful and so rich that they exist on a level where the ordinary punter, it's they're called Liverpool or they're called Manchester or they're called Leicester or whatever, but the ordinary people just are totally detached
have
from that.
nothing to do with them exactly.
Don't
Yeah,
reach them. Don't reach them.
yeah.
Okay, talk about reaching. I want to give you another woman, another person that has died. Ethel Kennedy.
Hmm.
Ethel Kennedy. She died at, I don't know what, I think she was, 96. 96. She
Yeah,
died in October. Um, she
yeah,
was some woman, you know. She was
yeah.
Robert Kennedy's um, wife.
What do?
And she had
Uh,
something like 11 children, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
She is she lived through tumultuous times. She saw her brother-in-law shot dead, and she saw her husband shot dead. She had 11 children, and I think one of her children, as it one of her children had her legs amputated or something. And then, of course, well, the current one, Robert, has joined Trump, which I think
oh,
must be absolute denial of the Kennedy legacy. No wonder the
mm,
whole families come out and issued statements, sort of, uh, what would you say? What's the word,
disassociating
Jude?
themselves from is an euphemism.
Disassociating them. That's the word, disassociating
Mhm.
themselves. I was going to say reneging, but that's not the right word. Disassociating themselves from him. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, Jude, the Kennedy, I don't know what's the Kennedy. The Kennedys always stood for whether in their private life. Remember, Joe said he was going to run John F. for the presidency. He was going to sell him the same way they sold soap powder. But
Mm, mm.
anyway, but on the surface, the Kennedys back in the day stood for civil rights. They were equal rights for black people, and they had a great track record.
Well,
When there was
Robert.
riots and various places, the only
Mhm.
white politician who could go to a black area was Robert F. Kennedy.
Uh,
So, like, it was they have a strange legacy. But Ethel lived through really, really tumultuous times, didn't she?
yeah, yeah. She was a strong woman. She was a strong woman. And yes, I would agree with you that actually, of all the Kennedys, my pick would have been Bobby Kennedy. I thought he was. I think he underwent something of a conversion because he used to sit on the panel with Joe McCarthy during the
Yeah,
witch hunting of
yeah,
people from Hollywood and so on. But he then had a conversion. Now, whether that happened during his brother's lifetime or whether it happened afterwards. But certainly when he was running in 68, he was committed and fully committed to the civil rights of black people. And he sought their vote,
yeah.
and I think they responded to it. And when he spoke, he very often spoke extempore without notes. And,
Yeah.
his sincerity bridged the gap. And I remember the time, was it Martin Luther King was killed? I'm not sure of the order in which they died, but
Yeah.
he said, I know what it's like to have someone that's very important in your life killed. That's what happened to my brother. And he called on
Yeah.
them not to engage in violence. But of course, none of them listened to him. There was something like a
No.
hundred American cities were in flames for some weeks after the assassination of Martin Luther King. But what the
King.
hell did they expect? What did they expect?
Mm,
Okay,
mm.
let's move to what might be our last item, except you can think of a better one, and that is the fact there's an article that's titled this in the Irish Times today: "Immigration and the Rise and Fall of the Irish Far Right in 2024." Because, as we
Mm.
know, the far right was creating riots and attacking the police and all sorts of things, uh, but it seems to have died down. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you interpret that, Pat?
Jude, at one stage they were really, really uh I think it was Jude. There was always a few, like Jude. There's a couple. There was a few around where I live as well, but they were a very very small minority. But they were very vocal, and Jude, a lot of them went on social media, and they were spewing out hate. Jude, let's get that clear. These
Mm-hmm.
people are rapists and bigots and all the rest of it, and so on and so on. Like Jude, let's be like some of them possibly were, but so some of the sort of homogenous population here, our native population. So like it was unbelievable. But here's the thing: they were very vocal. When the immigration thing, when the war broke out in Ukraine, we Ireland got I would say disproportionate number of asylum seekers, and because we're a Noel society and we're not that used to incomers, we were used to people leaving instead of people
Mm.
coming in.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
weren't prepared for it. We didn't have the culture for it. We don't have the facilities for it. We don't have no hospitals, schools, and you name it. So it was a big upheaval, and these people fed on that. But anyway, Jude, here's the thing: they got a lot. They were like a sort of drum. They were making a lot of noise, and a lot of people thought they were going to make a big impression in the last elections. Jude, as far as I remember, they said even if they added up all their votes, they wouldn't get a single TD.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, the nearest to that right wingness, so to speak, was the Hutch,
Yeah,
whatever his name was,
uh,
and
the monk.
he didn't even get in. But apparently, that's not the pattern, because the pattern in places like France and Germany is that these guys who are agitating against immigrants. Actually, quite a number of them get
Yeah, yeah,
into
yeah,
power, not into power, but into parliament. So
yeah,
we're looking up, and in fact, there was a poll very shortly before the election in the south, and there were three things that were important to people. The poll found: health, housing, and immigration. And of the
yeah,
three, immigration was the top. And yet
yeah,
in the election, it didn't feature at all, hardly. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't remember anybody. Like, there must have been some people
There was a guy in
making,
Dublin got elected onto the was it Fingal Council, and
yeah.
everybody thought he was going to do brilliant. I can't remember his name. I was going to get elected as a TD, or he had the best chance. He came nowhere. He was a nobody.
Well, that's kind of wonderful. I mean, you see, in a way, I blame the, as they say, I blame the government. The government made a bollocks of it. I
Yeah,
think they responded, as the Irish people did, with generosity. These poor people are in need of a refuge, so we'll open our doors, swing them open. Germany did something similar, actually. But we didn't stop to think, or the South didn't stop to think, like, are we able to handle this? Will we have
yeah,
room for these people? Will we be able to integrate them or give them a harbour in a dignified and decent way? They didn't do that. I mean, the
yeah.
idea of saying, not saying a word about it, and suddenly people wake up somewhere in a small town in the west of Ireland, and Jesus, 100 immigrants, male immigrants, in a place down the
Oh,
road. That's just asking for trouble. It's calling,
absolutely.
bringing all
And
the
by the way,
nasty features that are there inside
yeah,
of it.
that does not make people racist or anything all the rest of it. But then that what where you cross the line is there's some people stirring up a lot of trouble against totally innocent people who are seeking asylum, who have done no one any harm, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, these people, some of them stirred up trouble before these people even arrived.
Yeah.
Jude, there was quite a few places burned out. That was not the work of some amateurs. Those people were organized
Mm,
and so on.
hmm
And
hmm
I think that frightened some people. We don't want that in this country. Jude, we mightn't agree, all agree with, I know unverified immigrants coming in here or
hmm
all the rest of it, which is a normal thing in any society. Like, the last thing you don't want is some guy get out of prison in Ukraine arriving here, some rapist or something like that. But hey, that's a legitimate concern. But you shouldn't smear everybody that's coming here. Like, there should be, treat people decently until you know different.
I agree with that. I mean, in fact, as far as I know, the lawlessness among immigrants has been at least the same as, and maybe even less than, the settled population. So, I mean, it's
Yeah,
like saying, oh, I'm walking through Dublin Airport or I'm walking down O'Connell Street and, oh God, I need to mind myself. See, all those people are passing me. Some of those might be rapists.
yeah,
It makes sense in one way, in that, yes, there might be a rapist among them, but you don't have any evidence of that. And the same thing
yeah.
applies with the immigrants. Has the government in the South, Pat, do you know, have they solved that? Because that was a big problem. You had more people here than they could accommodate, and
Yeah,
where they
Jude,
accommodated them annoyed the hell out of people.
yeah, I think what the Irish government did at the start, Jude, was actually to their detriment. Our what would you call it? Social welfare system. That's the best way of putting it. Was far too generous, way, way too generous. Probably the
Mm,
best in Europe. So
mm.
everybody was getting out of Ukraine was coming here and so on. That flood has stopped. The second thing, Jude, the Polish economy has taken off like a rocket
Oh,
in the
really?
last 4 or 5 years,
Didn't
and
know
a
that.
lot of Polish people who were here have gone back.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the outcome of what's happened in Syria with the fall of Assad. So I don't know what, but we had quite a few Syrians here, particularly for some reason, quite a few in Derry, and so on. So I
Really?
don't know, but things definitely have settled down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not quite the same hot button topic it was a year ago, 2 years ago.
Well, I must say again, now this I'm a bit of a romantic, but my heart lifts when I see these things like the Kelly Hannon show or the Late Late Show or something,
Yeah,
and they talk to somebody in the audience, and or somebody in the audience makes a point, and they're maybe black or they're brown or they're Chinese looking, and they've got rich Dublin accents. I think that's
yeah,
wonderful. I think really we
I
should be on
agree
our
with you
knees
totally.
thanking God for that because uh, adding difference is how we grow. If we stay stuck in
Yeah,
the same old way, we're never going to change or get better. And I think that addition of people totally integrated, as somebody says,
yeah,
be nice to immigrants because if you go to hospital and die, they're probably the last faces you'll see are immigrant
yeah.
faces around your
Uh,
bedside.
well,
We really are. We
remember,
need to do some hard thinking about the what the immigrants offer to us. Some threat in terms of numbers, but an awful lot of benefits. Awful lot. See
yeah,
how
Jude, what
optimistic
was
I'm being?
Mao Zedong said, "Without change, there is no progress."
I
Right?
did.
Yeah. But do you remember years ago? There's a young fella. I can't remember his name. He played for Finn Harps, and they got promotion to the first division. He
Yeah,
was a young black fella, I think, possibly from Nigeria. I think
yeah.
it was Des Cahill who was the RT guy, and he made exactly the same point. He says after he laughed, he says, "I see this black guy," and he says with the thickest Donegal accent, he says, "I think it's brilliant." You
Yeah,
know,
it
yeah,
actually is. It actually is.
yeah.
And sure, the mayor of Derry is a black woman.
Yeah,
That,
Lillian
that
Sinai Bar.
I don't
Yeah,
know how good she is, but if all other things are equal, I think it's marvelous that she was appointed.
yeah.
Um, anyway, Pat, what are your thoughts as you peer into 2025 finally? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Are you going with your teeth clenched and fearful, or are you saying another year? That's pretty good. I'm still alive.
Well, another thing about I got to admit, I'm not exactly jumping with joy when I look around. When I see what's happening in Gaza, when I see what's happening in America, like Trump's coming in, I think the EU, there's Maloney in Italy, there's Urban in Hungary, there's a couple of guys in Austria. Their world seems to be lurching to the right, and human rights are no longer Jude, the hypocrisy that of the West in regard to what's happening in the world, the absolute lack of any kind of morals in regard to political positions. Remember, we were chatting earlier on, and I think it was you basically. Remember, somebody said countries don't have friends; they have interests.
Mm.
I think we've taken that. It's almost like capitalism. It's become extreme. There's no such. Somewhere in the middle, you have to have a sort of you have to have some sort of principles and decency. We're human beings, and human rights have to come in. And that whole principle, Trump lies, cheats, as a charlatan.
Mm.
People voted for him, and I'm
Mm.
sort of going, wait a minute, like he's a liar, he's a racist, he's a misogynist. What values do you see in him that you think
Mm.
he's worthy of your vote?
Mm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, Trump is ridiculous. I mean, he's
Yeah,
opening up terrible sort of vistas and saying when he does it, other people will say, "Well, Jesus, if he does it, I'm a politician. I'll do the same thing, and they'll like me too." On the other hand, Pat, part of this now you said in a previous podcast that you were haunted by Gaza, which I thought was
yeah,
a telling phrase because a lot of us are haunted by Gaza. But the reason we're haunted by Gaza is we see it. I
yeah,
mean, there probably is as many people being killed between Ukraine and Russia as there
yeah,
are in the Gaza Strip. Now, immediately, I grant you that those are soldiers and these are innocent civilians. But I'm just
yeah.
saying there's a lot of nasty, bad stuff going on in the
Absolutely.
world and always has been. Always
Yeah,
has been. Uh, it's only with the Vietnam War, I think, that the role of television came into play and could see what it was like, what happens in war. That people get
yeah.
shot, blown to bits, you see them groaning in agony. And Gaza has been covered in that way. I'm not surprised because didn't the Israelis ban the BBC and Western cameras?
Yeah, they won't allow back. You see, they couldn't stop. What do you call it?
Al
Al
Jazeera?
Jazeera. Al Jazeera were already in there.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So they were embedded in the community,
Mm, mm,
and they had a lot of people in there, so they couldn't sort of, get Al
mm.
Jazeera out.
Well,
So,
they
but
killed
anyway,
enough of them.
they have shot dead something like 700 journalists or something,
Aye,
and so
aye,
on. And I always remember Jeremy Bowen, the BBC's international editor or world
yes.
editor, whatever the hell they call it these days, saying when you ban journalists, it's obviously you don't want them to see what you're going to do.
Okay, Pat, that's all we can do today. Happy New
Hey, Jude,
Year. Don't get too pissed,
happy
for
New
God's
Year,
sake. And go
and
to bed
and
early. Go to bed early.
and
Don't
go to
stay up
bed
at
early,
12 o'clock. Okay?
and